Welcome to PCB Chat, where we talk with experts across the printed circuit design, manufacturing, and electronics supply chain fields. I'm Mike Buteau, Editor-in-Chief of PCD&F and Circuits Assembly. First, a word from today's sponsor. Are your PCB buyers staying competitive in the face of COVID-19 restrictions, increased raw material and precious metal costs, rising freight prices, and a less competitive US dollar? Learn how to save up to 25% on your PCB purchases through a new webinar from board buying expert Greg Papandrew. Register now at pcb2day.com. We are talking today with Andy Kannurpatti, the global business leader, films and laminates, of the Interconnect Solutions Unit of DuPont Electronics and Imaging.
So Andy, I want to thank you for making the time to talk with me today. A little over 2 years ago, DuPont opened the Silicon Valley Technology Center. And what I'd like to do is start by revisiting the thinking behind that investment decision, and then tell me how it's panned out so far.
A little over 2 years ago, it's also coincidentally around the same time that we had merged as Dow and DuPont, and we were establishing a merged company, Dow DuPont, overall. And we were taking a hard look at where our footprint was in terms of where we should be doing our innovation activities with our customers, where we need to be doing our application development work and technical work related to that so that we can be close to customers. So certainly one of the areas that we serve with our material solutions from DuPont, and at that time we were calling ourselves Dow DuPont, and since then we have split, as you may know, and now we're the new DuPont, focused on specialty products and solutions. But it's as true as it was that day when we opened the center, that we needed to be close to the firms in Silicon Valley that are related to all the electronics activities, as well as leading edge transportation, automotive activities, and a variety of other sectors that Silicon Valley has really continued to pioneer. So we wanted to be close to it and establish the innovation center here and the Silicon Valley Tech Center that supports all the application work with our customers here. And that journey has continued. In fact, we have continued to expand our footprint in terms of our lab capability and work that we're able to do with our customers. And we've had a lot of good success working with our OEM partners as well as circuit board manufacturers in terms of how they supply those leading edge solutions that are necessary to get into all these devices that have continue to evolve as we talk about, right?
So just to clarify, the Silicon Valley Technology Center really is more than a showplace. It's really just it's a functioning application center.
Absolutely. We certainly want to share with customers what we have done and what we are capable of doing. And there's that portion of what we do at the Silicon Valley Tech Center is only the tip of the iceberg. We actually do active engagements with customers on trying to solve their problems. At the Innovation Center, what we typically do is working sessions to share with them what kind of materials and products DuPont as a corporation can provide to them. And then we take it one step further with engagements with our scientists and engineers that are co-located here in Silicon Valley Tech Center to work on specific projects that come out of those discussions so that we can help them solve their problems for next generation products or systems that they're looking at. So, for example, one of the areas that we really drive, have driven a lot of activity, I should say, is in what we call high speed, high frequency, which most people tend to refer to as the coming of 5G, right? And so we talk about data transmission, high speed, high frequency data transmission as a focus area, and we have some lab capability here that is absolutely world class. I mean, we can measure properties on materials as well as on module level, for at high frequencies up to like 110 gigahertz, which allows us the capability to engage with telecom data center folks that are working on new systems and improvements for that, around data transmission, but also, consumer electronics, certainly aerospace and defense and automotive are also areas that we focus on. So if you look at it from an electronics standpoint, we have done a lot of work here. And we also have capability here to support other polymer needs in the transportation industrial area as well. While our major focus here is on electronics, given the types of customers that we are able to access here in Silicon Valley, we do also work on programs beyond that here. But it isn't, to your point, Mike, this is actually very much a functioning application development center that is able to engage internally within DuPont to all the R&D centers we have within our business units. So electronics and imaging being a business unit, we have R&D centers all over the world. And I sit within Interconnect Solutions, which is a business that focuses on enabling our customers to have their devices transmit signals from point A to point B within a circuit or within a device or between devices from a wireless communication standpoint, right? So we are really focused on interconnections, interconnect solutions, and so that area tends to be a significant focus as well for us here in Silicon Valley. That's why I'm co-located with the scientists and engineers here as well.
So I'd like to talk more about the applications in a moment, but sure. I want to pivot first to the Circleville, Ohio plant. DuPont allocated, I think it was $220 million was what was listed in the press release toward expansion at that plant, and you broke ground there in October of 2019.
Yep.
What is the status of that expansion? Is everything up and running now?
We expect it to be fully functional in the second half of 2021. We have been building this site, and there is a lot of activity going on there. So despite the current COVID environment, we've taken all the precautions, and we continue to have significant activity at the plant site, and we're building, and we're on track. The timing was expected to be second half of 2021, and that's where we are at this point. We are on track.
I know that Circleville produces materials for more than just printed circuit applications.
Absolutely.
Can you do a quick walkthrough of what other industries you support there?
This Circleville site produces much of our polyimide film. We produce it in other places as well. And you heard of our Kapton branded products or Oasis branded products, as well as our Pyrolux and Intera branded products. Kapton and Oasis are either plain polyimide films or coated or laminated polyimides, where we may have laminated something with a fluoropolymer, for instance, or we may have coated it with some other specialized material to enable a variety of applications, right? So the Kapton Oasis platform in general, goes into wire insulation material. Oasis is used a lot in our aerospace applications. So we work with OEMs that put it into a variety of different specific end uses within aerospace. We also supply into the automotive application. We supply into e-motors, electric motors applications, whether that's rail motors or whether that's other applications in oil and gas and whatnot. So we are in a variety of applications when it comes to polyimide film that's modified in many different ways and then further downstream processed by our customers to meet those requirements. The one common theme I'll tell you, Mike, is that if it's a severe environment, if it requires all kinds of durability and performance, it is a high performance material, high reliability material, and that's how we see the customers see it as well, and that's how they adopt those materials. That's why they adopt those materials. Pyrolux is our flex laminate brand. So we produce the polyimide film in places like Circleville, Ohio, and then we do take it and further process it where we would laminate it to create copper coated clads, right? Flex copper coated clads, we call them FCCL. That goes into a variety of flex circuit applications, whether that's in high reliability aerospace type applications, or whether that's in medical applications sometimes, but also very much in consumer electronics and telecom, those kinds of places that we go into. The last one I mentioned was an Intera brand of products, which is also using a polyimide core. It's a copper clad. And so the copper clad there are used as embedded capacitance materials. And we're seeing some increase in adoption of that material. It's been around for a long time, but what we're seeing now more and more as there is a need to reduce the footprint, or to be able to put more in a server, for example, server rack, for example, people are looking at those kinds of designs because it does allow them to reduce the size of the overall package that they need. So there's a variety of things that we do, and those are the kinds of places we go into. So it's not just electronics; it goes into industrial, aerospace, auto markets as well.
So I have to ask then, how much of the production from Circleville is for North American consumption?
I actually don't have an exact ratio to give you. Rather than think of it that way, the way I think about it is being in Circleville, Ohio, where we also have our R&D facility for developing new materials. What it allows us to do is to actually work with many of the product designers and OEMs that actually are looking for materials that are next generation materials that then get adopted. Another way to think about this is how much of the product design gets done in North America is the way I'd like to think about it. And I'd say the preponderance of what we design is what our customers design. We see them happen in North America, and the specifications are earned here. So having the R&D and the production facility here in Ohio serve that is of significance to us, certainly. Okay, I don't know that it's in general I can tell you, but this is not about just our Kapton or Pyrolux lines. In general, as you know, there's a significant amount of electronics production in Asia, and I'd say we're no different than anybody else in terms of how much sales we have in Asia versus Americas or EMEA. And we can get you those numbers later if you're interested.
Well, I think that you addressed the larger point, right? So, the U.S., which makes up almost all the North American PCB market, is down to a couple hundred fabricators and roughly $3 billion a year in output. And Flex, of course, only makes up a smaller percentage of that. So, if you look at it from simply a standpoint of, is there enough production business here to support DuPont's long-term presence, that's only one side of one part of the picture, right? You noted the preponderance of the design activity, and I think that really is where we're getting at that's really the heart of the matter, right? That's what really influences supplier presence at this point, because there's so many companies, not only the ones that are really well known in the top of their markets, like Apple, but companies that in an electronic sense really barely existed 10, 15 years ago, like the Teslas and the Amazons and things like that, mm-hmm. who are, have gone from nowhere to being, again, top of the industry players. And, I haven't taken them apart yet, but I have a Nest Mini and an Alexa here in my office. I don't know how many flex boards are in there. I imagine that there's something in there. And at some point, maybe in the next year, I will spill something on them or upgrade, and I always take apart what I had. So I guess I'll find out.
And to your point, by the way, just so you're aware, in Interconnect Solutions, although my focus is more on the Kapton and Pyrolux brands in that business, we also have another line of business that focuses on imaging film, which we call Riston, mm-hmm. As well as our metallization chemistry products. And by the way, we produce those globally, right? We produce them in the U.S. and as well as in Asia. So where it makes sense to have some of these facilities, production facilities, close to where the customers are going to consume a lot of it, or also, think about metallization chemistry. You don't want to be shipping those across. So you want to manufacture some of that locally. So we do look at, when we look at where we should be locating our production assets, it's strategic. It is focused, to your point, on there's a lot of these designers and startups that, like you said, 10 years ago, some of these names were not that big, and now they are putting forward requirements on materials and solutions that we better understand and respond to as materials solution suppliers. So we've got to be close to them. And that's the other thing, right? So yeah, like Silicon Valley Tech Center for us, Sunnyvale Application and Innovation Center that we have, we want to be very close to the designers and do application development with them. Similarly, we have to have our materials production and R&D facilities in areas where we have access to folks that are pushing the envelope of how they're going to use the material. And by the way, we don't discount, one cannot forget that the fabrication, the circuits assembly part of it is not a simple job. And folks that are doing that work are also continuing to push the boundary and productivity that they can achieve. And that has material implications for us. And so we do have large application technical groups, as we call them, that work with our customers, whether that's a circuit assembly type customer, fabricator, or whether that's an OEM or a designer that actually has certain requirements. So we do have all of that globally, but we've got to be thinking about this around how do we solve those problems that allows you to have that Nest or Alexa, and you shouldn't have to worry about whether it's got a flex circuit or a rigid circuit or a rigid flex. It doesn't matter. It has to, when you ask Alexa to play the song you like, it needs to do it, right? So that's what we need.
You keep leading into my next questions, which is great. What do you think is the role of the material supplier insofar as helping to drive a market? And do they even have a role?
When you say material supply driving the market, I think we're thinking about it the wrong way from my perspective. Okay. We're not here to push a product. We're not here to say, hey, this technology, this material is cool, try to use it, right? So we're not driving the market in that sense.
Enable may be a better word.
Perhaps. But we think of our developments and our products as being enabled by the market, actually. Okay, so we think about it almost the opposite way. If you just take a look at what's happened now, right? Let's just pick high speed, high frequency again as an example. It wasn't that long ago that I was carrying a phone that is made by Nokia, and it was a texting phone, perhaps. Some people had the fancier razor that they could fold, which came later. But the amount of technology and information that's getting transmitted now as we've gone from there to where we are today around smartphones is just phenomenal. And that's not something we enabled achieving that kind of performance as a material solution provider. That's our role. But that need was being created by innovation that's being done by our customers and our customers' customers and so on, right? I mean, the other example you mentioned, Tesla, or think of all these other automotive companies that are investing in autonomous driving. Today, some would argue it's not yet 100% reality, right? And there are other firms that argue that it is a reality and they already have it in their cars. Nevertheless, the point is there's a trend that's saying there's going to be a lot more need for data processing, data transmission, edge computing, all kinds of different capabilities. And to do that, at the core of it, there are these material requirements that are necessary. So, for example, you take high-speed data transmission. The more we transmit data in these circuits, which are also getting miniaturized because they want to put it into a nice form factor that you and I can carry in our back pockets, there's a need for ongoing improvements around thermal and other areas, right? We want to keep the circuits cool, whether that's in a data center tower or whether that's in a small handheld device. And so then that's what excites our scientists and our engineers, and that we see as our role, saying, okay, what other things do we need to be able to provide to ensure that this data can be transmitted reliably at the speeds that you want it? And that's how we see it. So that's taking all these market trends and saying at the core, what's happening? How do we then take it back and say, what do we do with that? And so we not only look at it from Interconnect Solutions business I'm talking about, looks at it from the circuits and also what's happening beyond the chip level. But in terms of the chip and what needs to be happening right at the substrate and so forth, there are other aspects, other parts of our electronics and imaging business that actually look at that as well. So as material solutions providers, we are always trying to work with folks that are looking at how they're going to be pushing the capabilities of all of these devices and tools that really are pushing the edge of human imagination, I think. And I think that's understanding that and working with that is our role. And that's why we need to be close to them, right? I mean, if I'm sitting and the application scientists and engineers are sitting far away from the leading thinkers of that type of advancement that's happening, then we miss the boat. And so our role is to be close to them, understand it, and figure out how we can solve those problems with our capability in science and engineering.
Flex materials have come a long way over the past couple of decades. When I started in the industry, they were a specialty material used primarily for passively connecting rigid boards. Now, we commonly see manufacturers soldering components on flex. The materials are used in harsh environments. They're used to handle high-speed transmission lines, as you noted earlier. Where does DuPont see the sweet spot for its materials over the next 3 to 5 years? I mean, from an applications perspective. In other words, where is business really picking up for you?
I mean, certainly high speed, high frequency, as I mentioned, whether that's consumer electronics or telecom data centers. So you can think of it as high frequency from a wireless standpoint and high speed from a wired communication standpoint. And those are areas that are really, really important, and they're continuing to be driven. We've had always a very stable, strong presence in some of the higher performance, high reliability markets like aerospace and defense. And those will continue, and those are not going to go away. But I do think if you think about as we just look at what's happening with 5G infrastructure installations, as well as devices that everybody has become reliant on, where you want to instantly be able to download a movie and watch it, and those kinds of trends, and automotive adopting more and more electronics, where again there is a trend around high frequency and high speed data transmission. That's where we see, and why flex is something we may ask, and it may not be, I'm not just talking specifically about flex. I do think that some of the material sets and solutions that we have will be applicable in flex, rigid, and many other applications as well. So it's not just a flex story to think about that area, is what I would say. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, look, we know through the work, both, from the suppliers that have shared their research, and then some of the consortia like INEMI and certainly HDP, which are looking into what the limitations are of materials. And then, if we can push past some of those, how that affects going from the e-glass to copper, if we can affect improvements at the glass and resin levels, how will that play into the copper and open, the door to improvements there, right? So you mentioned metallization, and again, I'm going to show my age, but I remember when the industry felt that like 5 gigabits per second was sort of the max we were going to get through a line of copper, and well, we've shown them, haven't we?
And I think and that's the other thing too. So I mentioned another area, right? As you increase these data transmission rates, yes, there will be some losses, right? And where does that loss appear? Things get hot. And so you got to have material challenges that we have to solve around thermal capability and handling. How do we take the heat away? How do we maintain these are harsh conditions that these materials are going to face, but some of those conditions are created even by the data transmission. And how do we address that? And so those are other challenges associated that are definitely going to be there. I mean, and there are areas around in EMI shielding and so forth, which people are continuing to address. There's going to be many interesting challenges, and we see, from a materials standpoint, that the industry has to tackle. And certainly, as a solution provider in the industry, we're focused on how do we help customers overcome those, and that's where we put our science to work.
How aggressively does DuPont try to inform, educate, pick a word, the designers, the circuit designers, insofar as the ideal use and the limitations of the material?
Well, we certainly want to be in the conversation when they are in the process of thinking through how to solve a problem, right? And so we have, an example like I gave you was we have our applications teams in Silicon Valley. We also have applications technical groups globally, and we have leading experts, many of them that you might have even interviewed, talked to, who participate in industry forums, who meet with designers one-on-one, where we actually are talking to them about what their challenges are. And sometimes, it means that understanding their design challenges and even creating new material sets that actually will solve the problem. Because, and this is where it gets interesting. It's not just about telling them the properties or the capabilities of the materials we have. Sometimes it's, many times actually, when especially you're talking about pushing the envelope, it's having the conversation with them early enough where they're thinking about a specific design element that they want to put into a device, let's say 2-3 years down the road. We're already talking to them, or even sometimes it's longer than that in time scale. And we're talking to them to say, what is it that you're trying to solve, and how can we help you? Because we have the toolkit to create different solutions, and how do we work with you? And that's how we do it. And I don't know that that's as much of an education of them about how to use, and we certainly do that piece as well. Once we have the materials, and if the problem or the challenge is similar to something we have seen elsewhere, or the industry has solved elsewhere, but there's a different designer who's trying to solve the problem, we will certainly share that information. We do webinars, we do all those kinds of things. But and also our team members go out there and spend time with the designers. But more importantly, from an overall industry transformation perspective, I would say we need to be talking to people, and we are, years before that design element even shows up in a device, and trying to help them solve that problem.
Well, Andy, this has been very helpful. Are there any other elements of what DuPont has in its forefront right now that you want to highlight?
There's a few things, right? But I would highlight one. We are continuing to engage at various points in the electronics value chain. Okay, we want to work with the design firms. We want to work with OEMs who have their own product developers. And we also want to work with, and we do work with, all the circuit manufacturers and fabricators, as we call them, right? So we're trying to, because why do you want to work with the circuit assembly folks? We want to make sure that it actually, our materials process well, the solutions are actually going to meet their need in terms of meeting their productivity requirements and whatnot. So we actually look at the whole gamut. And one of the things that I want to share is with this bringing together of Dow and DuPont, and now this new DuPont entity that we are, especially in the electronics world, and electronics and imaging business unit, we have a total solution, and we continue to ensure that we can provide a complete solution for our customers that span the requirements from end to end. And where we don't have it, we are very clear that we don't have it, and we work on if it makes sense, and if it really does help solve the problem for the customer, we want to make sure we develop that capability. that's where we're focusing our efforts. How do we bring in a total solution approach to the customer, the OEM, to the fabricator? How do we help them move this to the next generation? So one of the things that I would say, and this may be something we can have follow-up discussions around, is how do we get that message? How do we help them? To your point about how do we show them that we can solve problems, we continue to try and do some outreach, right? A lot of it tends to be folks calling on somebody, a company or individuals and working through their challenges. We also, have folks driving the innovation center and the activities that gets the message out so that we can do larger sort of conversations and workshops and sessions with folks. And we drive communications like this one where we can get our intent out in the market so that we can get folks to call on us and if they have challenges that we haven't discussed with us. On the same vein, what I would say, Mike, and I want to leave the door open with you for this, is in the future, maybe we can also talk about some of these areas in depth. I mean, maybe we can go into a little deeper dive, and it may not be me. It definitely won't be me if it's anything in depth, but we will get somebody with real expertise to sit with you and talk about all of these challenges and how we're trying to address them. And maybe we can, or you can even write pieces that could be helpful. Because at the end of the day, what I'm interested in is that we reach and support the value chain from end to end. That's what we're interested in.
Your point is well taken. The assemblers traditionally haven't been as keyed in, I think, on the substrate material. And now, as we've evolved into lead-free solders, and there's just so many different alloys out there, and the characteristics of how these alloys, interact, and the soldering temperatures that the substrate is going to be exposed to, it's very different than when everything was just tin lead eutectic. The best practices, of course, are at that kickoff meeting. The circuit board designer would be there, the SI engineer would be there, the firmware engineer would be there, but you'd also have the systems engineer and the manufacturing engineer, not just the fabricator, but the assembler. Not a whole lot of companies, in my experience, have gotten to that point. It's still a bit staggered. And so the DFM rules aren't necessarily put in place. Some of the communications that might take place about how the product is going to be assembled isn't really communicated, up front. So those things aren't hard-coded when they should be. So there's still a big learning curve, I think, for most companies. Some are there, but most of them aren't.
Well, and if you look at it from depending on which region you're looking at it, there's also been a change in personnel and the demographic changes that we're all living through. I know many PCB manufacturers have had to face the fact that there's a whole bunch of folks that retired not that long ago, and we got a lot of new people too. And so even if the best practices were established, sometimes you have to go back and reestablish them, right? And it takes, I don't know if you see that, but we certainly see some of those taking place in front of us, right?
Well, this is one of my favorite subjects. I think that the demographics, at least in North America and probably Europe, of the PCB industry follow almost like a binomial distribution, right? The two bumps, with the far right being folks that are over 55 and the far left being people that are under 35. And the dip is the people between 35 and 55 that left the industry. There was a lot of industry drain back in 2001, 2002. And it didn't really start recovering until after the recession of 08, 09. And so you lost a generation of personnel.
Right. And so we're dealing with that. And so one of the things that we actually like to do is to take our applications resources, or our folks that are in our sales and technical sales and service type of functions, to actually sit with customers and even do sometimes training sessions with them on what we think would be best practices. And we also work with our distributor partners to do some of that kind of work, and we expect them to do that. And You probably know DuPont, has Inselectro or ECMS and Tritech and other folks that are distributors here in the U.S. and Canada. Also have other distributors in Europe like CCI and others. So we actually work with them pretty closely to see how we can continue to do those kinds of education training and also address some of the challenges that they're dealing with and try to help them out. It's not always easy to do. Some of this work. If a company has not adopted best practices, it's certainly transformational for them if they can make the change and do it, because that starts to pay dividends too. So, I mean, there's so many things we can talk about there, Mike, but I don't want to extend the conversation here on that. It's one of my favorite topics as well. It takes a lot of effort to bring back knowledge and expertise that might have been lost because of some of those kinds of changes in these companies.
A big thank you to my guest, Andy Kannurpatti of DuPont, and thanks to our sponsor, PCB Today, bringing a new webinar on assessing and managing PCB vendors. Register now at PCBtoday.com. For PCB Chat, this is Mike Buteau. Have a nice day.